"Sir, may I have your leftovers?" The words cut through the air like glass shattering in a cathedral. For a moment, everything inside Le Pavon, the most exclusive restaurant in the city, froze. The chandeliers, shaped like frozen stars, threw their light across polished tables where billionaires and politicians dined in hushed tones. A pianist's fingers danced on ivory keys, but even the music seemed to hesitate. In the farthest corner, hidden behind orchids and shadow, sat John Maxwell. 48 years old, billionaire, tech mogul, widower. His Armani suit was flawless. His platinum watch gleamed under the candlelight, but none of it masked the emptiness carved into his chest. In front of him sat a filet mignon, untouched, its aroma rich and indulgent. He didn't notice. The empty chair across from him was louder than any voice in the room. His hand lingered on a glass of Bordeaux, its red swirl reflecting memories he had tried so hard to bury. 10 years had passed since the accident, since his wife, Lillian, and their 3-year-old son, Caleb, were stolen away in twisted steel and shattered glass. John had built empires, drowned himself in silence, yet nothing filled the hollow ache. Tonight was no different. He lifted the glass, heavy with ghosts, toward his lips, when that trembling voice stopped him. "May I have your leftovers, sir?" His head snapped toward the sound. A girl stood there, no older than 19, blonde hair tied loosely in a messy bun, strands falling into her tired face. Her coat was thin, threadbare against the chill, and in her arms she cradled a baby, 7, maybe 8 months old, wrapped in a worn blanket. The child's wide eyes locked onto John's plate, the steam rising from the mashed potatoes and meat like an unspoken promise. The girl's voice had been soft, almost apologetic, yet it sliced through the restaurant's stillness. Folks paused midair. Conversations fell silent. A waiter stepped forward, alarm etched on his face. But John raised a hand. A single commanding gesture, his eyes fixed on hers. There was no shame in them. No begging. No performance. Just exhaustion and something fierce, unbreakable. A mother's devotion. She wasn't asking for herself. She was asking for the tiny life pressed to her chest. John's throat tightened. The candle between them flickered. Something shifted deep inside him. Not a revelation, not yet, but a spark. He didn't know then that this moment, this simple question, would unravel the walls he'd built for a decade and lead him toward a redemption he never sought. He studied her. The worn coat, the sneakers splitting at the seams, the fragile frame. But it wasn't her poverty that struck him. It was her eyes. Eyes that didn't waver. Eyes carrying both unbearable sorrow and unshakable dignity. Eyes that refused to break. For a heartbeat they stood locked in silence, an invisible thread tightening between them. Then, with a quiet movement, John slid his plate forward. "Take it," he whispered. She didn't snatch the food like someone starving. No. What she did struck John harder than any desperate cry could. With delicate hands, she pulled a small square of cloth from the worn satchel slung across her shoulder. It was clean, though frayed at the edges, like something cherished beyond its worth. Carefully, almost reverently, she wrapped the mashed potatoes and slices of meat inside, folding the corners as though she were sealing away treasure, not scraps. Then, lowering herself to one knee, she drew her baby closer. From the pocket of her thin coat, she retrieved a small plastic spoon, scratched and faded but still functional. John's breath caught as he watched her scoop the tiniest portion of food, blowing gently to cool it. With infinite tenderness, she guided the spoon toward her child's lips. The baby's mouth opened instinctively, his little tongue reaching for the taste. And when the warm potatoes touched his tongue, he let out a soft bubbling coo. A sound so innocent, so unfiltered with joy, it sliced straight into John's chest. His fingers curled against the table's edge. The baby's face lit up in the candlelight, cheeks round and glowing, a smile blooming across his features like the first sunrise after endless winter. His chubby hands patted his mother's chest as though applauding her love. John hadn't seen a smile like that in 10 years, not since Caleb. Something clogged his throat. He turned away for a heartbeat, trying to blink back the blur in his eyes. But the sound of the child's laughter dragged him back, tethering him. He couldn't look away. The girl didn't notice the room, didn't notice the stares pressing in on her like walls. She didn't flinch beneath judgment. She simply fed her baby one spoonful at a time, steady, patient, unshaken. She wasn't begging. She wasn't apologizing. She was just being a mother, and John realized it wasn't pity he felt. It wasn't charity. What tightened around his heart was the sacred truth of what he was witnessing. A love so raw, so unbending, that it could never be bought or replaced. A love only those who had tasted loss could truly recognize. When the baby was full, she tucked the cloth-wrapped food back into her bag, adjusted the blanket around his tiny body, and rose. She didn't smile, didn't bow. She only gave John the faintest nod, acknowledgement of something unspoken, a silent thread binding them for one impossible moment. Then she turned and walked away, weaving through white linen and glittering glasses, vanishing into the cool night. John sat motionless, staring at the space she had left behind. The candle flickered. His glass of wine glowed untouched. The empty chair across from him whispered louder than ever, and then, before logic could stop him, before grief could anchor him back into his prison, he stood. Not quickly, not dramatically, quietly, with purpose. He set his napkin on the table, gave the hovering waiter a nod, and stepped out into the night. He didn't yet know why, only that he had to. At a distance, he followed her footsteps along the pavement, muffled against the sleeping city. She slipped into a narrow alley, clutching her child close like a shield against the world. Her movements were quick, cautious, as though every shadow threatened to swallow her whole. The alley opened into a crumbling parking lot, lined with forgotten brick walls and rusting cars. But one stood out. An old navy blue sedan, dented and peeling, its windows fogged with breath. It wasn't abandoned. It was home. She moved straight to it, opened the back door, and settled inside with her baby. A thin blanket served as a bed. She cradled him close, whispering something only he could hear. Then her voice, trembling but sweet, rose into a lullaby. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." The sound drifted across the cold night, fragile but powerful. The baby's tiny hand clutched her collar, his eyelids fluttering shut as the melody wrapped him in warmth. John stood hidden in shadow, transfixed. The scene was bleak, but the love, it was undeniable, irresistible. And then he moved forward. She stiffened, sensing him. Her head turned, eyes locking with his. "I'm sorry," he said softly, raising his hands in peace. "I just wanted to see if you're okay." Her voice was cautious but strong. "You followed me?" "Yes," John admitted, his tone low, steady. "I did." She didn't run. She didn't plead. She simply studied him. The man in the expensive suit who had crossed the line between two worlds, and weighed what she saw. "I saw how you fed your son," John said quietly. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed the storm beneath. I've never seen anything like that." "I needed to understand." The girl hesitated, then lowered her gaze to the baby in her arms. "His name is Noah," she said softly. "I'm Emily." "Noah," John repeated, tasting the name like it belonged to something sacred. 8 months? She nodded. "He loves mashed potatoes." John's voice faltered, almost breaking. "So did my son." Emily blinked, surprised by the confession, but she didn't press. She simply listened, with that rare, heavy stillness of someone who knew grief too well to intrude. "I was studying to be a nurse," she said after a pause. "Then I got pregnant. The father disappeared. My parents cut me off. I've been on my own ever since." Her words carried no bitterness, just facts. "We've lived in this car for 2 months now. I clean houses when I can, wait tables, whatever keeps us going." John's eyes drifted to the sedan. The threadbare blanket folded into a mattress, baby clothes stacked neatly as though they were treasure, a fragile fortress of survival. "I can help," John said almost urgently. "A hotel, food, whatever you need." But Emily raised a hand. "No, I'm not asking for money." Confused, he asked, "Then what do you want?" Her eyes softened. She looked down at Noah, brushing her lips against his temple. "Just one day," she whispered. "One day where he's warm, full and safe. That's all." The word struck him harder than any plea for cash, harder than any manipulation ever could. A flickering streetlight painted her face in amber. In that glow, John saw something that almost shattered him. Her eyes. Not identical, but hauntingly close to Lillian's. The same fierce devotion. The same armor of love wrapped around a fragile child. It cracked something inside him that had been sealed for a decade. He stepped back, suddenly unsteady. "Thank you," he murmured. Emily frowned. "For what?" "For reminding me I still have a heart." She didn't reply. She only held Noah tighter and resumed the lullaby. Her voice trembled but carried steady into the night. John lingered, unable to move, as her song wove around him like a fragile thread of grace. She didn't smile. She didn't shut him out either. And somehow, that was everything. From that night on, John couldn't let go. He carried the image of Emily's broken shoes and Noah's mashed potato smile into every boardroom, every meeting, every lonely evening. No matter how many zeros followed his bank balance, their faces followed him, too. He didn't speak to her again. Not at first. Instead, he moved the way he had always built his empire, silently, precisely, deliberately. He found a car parked behind a crumbling church lot. He never approached, never revealed himself. He only left things in the quiet dawn: a canister of baby formula, a pack of diapers, a sealed container of soup, still warm. He arranged for a pediatrician to stop by, disguised as part of a church outreach program. Emily never asked where he came from. She only held Noah longer afterward and whispered into the still air, "Thank you." At first, Emily resisted. Life had trained her to distrust good things, to brace for disappointment. But these small gifts came with no strings, no notes, no expectations. No one asked her to smile. No one demanded gratitude. They were simply there. And slowly, dangerously, suspicion gave way to something she hadn't allowed herself in months. Hope. Then, one frigid October evening, that hope was tested. Noah had been restless all day, refusing to eat. By nightfall, his skin burned with fever. Emily tried everything: cool cloths, rocking him back and forth, singing every lullaby she knew. Nothing helped. His tiny chest heaved with shallow, fast breaths. Desperate, she rushed him to the nearest hospital. At the front desk, the woman barely glanced up as Emily pleaded. "My baby, he's burning up, please. He needs a doctor. Do you have insurance?" The woman asked flatly. Emily hesitated. "No, but..." The woman's face hardened. "We're at capacity. You'll need to wait. Or try another facility." Emily's voice cracked. "He's only a baby. He has a fever of 104. He's not responding." "I'm sorry, ma'am," the woman said, tone like stone. "Without proper intake, there's nothing we can do." Emily staggered back into the cold night, clutching Noah's burning body against her chest. His cries had weakened into something worse. Silence, panic, and frost wrapped around her. She held him tighter, her heart pounding in terror. There was only one thing left to do. With shaking fingers, she pulled out her old phone. The screen was cracked, the battery low. She typed 2 words, "Help us." She didn't know if he would come. She didn't even know why she trusted that he might. But 6 minutes later, headlights cut across the curb. John's black SUV screeched against the curb, tires hissing on wet pavement. Before the engine even cut off, he was out, coat whipping in the wind, eyes ablaze with urgency. He didn't ask questions. He didn't waste words. He just extended his arms. Emily hesitated only a heartbeat before placing Noah into them. And for the first time all night, the baby didn't resist. His tiny hand curled around John's finger, weak but deliberate. As if he recognized something safe, something steady, John cradled him as though he'd done it 1,000 times before and strode straight into the hospital. He didn't wait in line. He didn't lower his voice. "I want a doctor now," he commanded, his tone iron wrapped in fire. "This child is in critical condition. I'll cover every expense. But if you let one more minute pass, I'll buy this hospital and replace every last one of you." The receptionist froze. Within seconds, Noah was rushed through double doors. Emily collapsed into a chair in the hallway, her body trembling, her face hidden in her hands. John sat beside her, silent, grounded. The minutes bled out heavy and endless until finally a nurse appeared. "Your son is stable," she said gently. "He's resting. We'll monitor him overnight." Emily's breath cracked free, a sound like glass shattering. She turned to John, tears pooling in her eyes. You came?" He nodded, voice low but certain. "Of course I did. The dam broke. Tears spilled faster than she could stop them. She leaned into him, chest heaving with relief and exhaustion, her head finding his shoulder. And John, without hesitation, wrapped his arms around her. He didn't shush her. He didn't ask her to explain. He just held her, steady against the sterile hum of fluorescent lights. For Emily, it was the first time she had allowed herself to collapse since becoming a mother. For John, it was the first time in 10 years that holding someone didn't feel like betrayal. They didn't speak of love. They didn't define anything. But something irreversible shifted that night. In the heartbeat of a man who had sworn never to care again, and in the breath of a girl who had only ever survived alone. But the world noticed. It started with a photo, slightly blurred, of John Maxwell leaving the ER with a baby in his arms and a young woman trailing close behind. Within hours, it was everywhere. Headlines, blogs, social media feeds. Tech billionaire's midnight rescue. Teen mom and the tycoon. The internet erupted. Emily's identity leaked within days. A hospital intake form posted online. Then came the commentary, relentless and cruel. Some called John a hero, compassionate, noble. Others turned venomous. She's a gold digger. This was staged. What kind of man risks his reputation like this? In the apartment John had secured for her and Noah, Emily sat in the dark. The only light, the glow of her phone screen. Each headline cut deeper. Each swipe brought more poison. Her chest tightened. Her hands shook. She finally turned the screen off, terrified that even its glow might touch Noah with that same cruelty. When he stirred in his crib, she laid a trembling hand over his chest to soothe him, whispering until his breathing softened again. Then she sat back on the bed, staring at the floor until the sky began to pale with morning. When John arrived, he knew instantly. Emily's posture was rigid, her eyes distant, her warmth replaced with something shuttered. "I can't do this," she whispered. He sat beside her carefully. "Emily, I don't want my son growing up in scandal," she interrupted, her voice sharp with pain. "I don't want him seeing lies one day and wondering if they're true." "You didn't do anything wrong," John said softly. "Neither did Noah," she shook her head. "That doesn't matter. People don't care. They already decided who I am." John's jaw tightened. His voice steadied into resolve. "Then let me tell them who you really are." That afternoon he called his publicist. No statements, no carefully scripted releases. He wanted nothing but truth. The following night he sat in a quiet studio under soft lights. No grandeur, no distractions. The interviewer asked a question and then let John speak. He didn't start with Emily. He started with Lillian and Caleb. He told the story he had buried for years. The accident, the silence the empire built over ashes. "I stopped living the day they died," he admitted, voice raw. "Success meant nothing. I was a ghost in my own life." Then, slowly, he spoke of Emily. "She wasn't asking for charity," he said. "She wasn't even asking for help. She just wanted to feed her son. And in doing so, she gave me something I thought I had lost forever." His voice cracked. "She didn't take anything from me. She gave me back my heart. A reason to care again. A reason to breathe." John lifted his eyes to the camera, his voice steady yet fragile. "Emily is not a headline," he said. "She is a mother. Noah is not a prop. He is a child. A beautiful, extraordinary child. I didn't save them. They saved me." The interview was raw, unpolished, human. And it worked. By morning, the tide had turned. Online threads shifted from cruelty to compassion. Mothers began sharing their own stories about single parenthood, about judgment, about the loneliness of raising a child without support. Nurses came forward, explaining how countless young women like Emily slipped through cracks in the system. Donations poured into shelters across the country. A mother in Kansas started a fund to help women just like her. Emily said nothing to the press. She stayed silent. But the next morning she stood at John's front door, Noah bundled against the autumn chill. She didn't knock. He opened it before she could. Her eyes were tired but clear, her voice firm. "I'm not leaving," she said. "If you still want us, we're here." John didn't answer with words. He simply stepped aside. "Let them in." And for the first time in years, he felt something shift inside him, permanent and peaceful. A door opened. not just in his home, but in his heart. The apartment John rented for them wasn't extravagant, modest by his standards. 2 bedrooms, soft grey walls, windows that caught the morning sun. Emily moved in with little more than 2 duffel bags, a baby carrier, and the heavy breath of someone who had never known a place safe enough to exhale. But within a week, the space was alive. Crayon drawings taped to the fridge, tiny socks draped across the heater, the scent of baby lotion and lullabies drifting through the rooms. They didn't define what they were. Not yet. There were no declarations, no titles, just life, shared. John began visiting every morning. At first he brought groceries or diapers, excuses to check in. But soon it became ritual. Noah would bounce at the sound of the door, his face lighting up with recognition. Emily, hair tied in that familiar loose knot, always had coffee brewing. Together they would sit, eat, talk. John learned how to hold a bottle at the perfect angle, how to warm milk without overheating, how to change a diaper, awkwardly at first, then with surprising ease. He memorized the rhythm of Noah's cries, distinguishing hunger from fatigue, discomfort from stubbornness. One afternoon, rocking Noah in his arms, John felt the baby's tiny hand clutch his shirt. The small weight against his chest was so steady, so real, that it jolted something awake in him. He didn't want to leave, not after the nap, not after the hour. He wanted to stay, Emily noticed. The way he lingered, the way he listened to Noah's babbles like they were symphonies. He didn't try to impress her, didn't try to control her. He just showed up quietly every single day. She had never known love that didn't come with conditions. Never known a man who simply chose to be present, without demand, without expectation, and in the soft hours between feedings and bath times, something began to grow. Not the kind of love the world romanticized, no fiery rush, no dizzy declarations. This was slower, deeper, a connection stitched together by persistence, by gentleness, by showing up again and again. One evening, after Noah finally drifted into sleep, they sat on the balcony together. A blanket shared between them, the city glowing gold and blue below. Neither spoke at first. The quiet was enough. Then John turned to her. His voice was low, almost a confession. When I lost Lillian and Caleb, I thought the part of me that cared, that wanted to belong, that needed to be needed, I thought it died with them. Emily's eyes shimmered in the moonlight. You didn't lose it, she whispered. It just waited. They didn't kiss that night. They didn't need to. The silence stretched between them like a promise, unspoken, undeniable. And for the first time in years, Emily smiled. Not the polite smile she gave strangers, not the tired smile she gave Noah. This one was different, rare, full, and John smiled back. A real smile, soft, unforced, lit from within. They weren't yet lovers. Not yet a family in name, but they were something stronger. 2 broken souls who had found in each other the slow, steady beginning of home. Then, one afternoon, a plain white envelope appeared, wedged beneath the apartment door. An unexpected gust of wind, ready to shift everything once more. Emily stared at the envelope for a long time before sliding her finger under the flap. Her hands shook as she unfolded the paper inside. The handwriting was instantly familiar, tight, neat, pressed into the page with too much force. Her mother's hand. There were no apologies written across paragraphs, no dramatic pleas, just a few simple words that carried the weight of years. If there's still a chance to know my grandson, I would like to try. Emily sat at the kitchen table for over an hour, the letter softening in her grip. Noah sat on the floor nearby, stacking colorful blocks and knocking them down with delighted squeals. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, but the silence around her was heavy, pressing into her chest like a stone. When John came by that evening, he found her still there, frozen in the same chair. She wrote, Emily whispered. Her eyes fixed on the letter. John picked it up, scanned the words and set it back down carefully. He lowered himself into the chair beside her. What are you thinking? Emily's voice broke into uncertainty. I don't know. It's been nearly 2 years since they last spoke to me, since they told me I wasn't their daughter anymore. John leaned closer, steady, grounding. You don't owe them anything. Her eyes lifted to his, clouded, torn. "But Noah, doesn't he deserve to know where he comes from even if it's broken?" John thought carefully before answering. "Then don't make the choice for him. Let him grow up with the chance to forgive or not, but let him decide." 3 days later, they drove back to the small town Emily once called home. Rolling green hills stretched out on either side of the narrow road. Faces in passing cars seemed to linger too long, carrying the weight of old gossip. At the end of a gravel driveway stood the house, white paint faded, porch swing still creaking softly in the wind. Emily stood there for what felt like forever, Noah on her hip, his small fists curled into her sweater. John waited a step behind, a quiet anchor, letting her move first. The front door creaked open. A woman stepped out, mid-50s, once sharp features now softened by years of sorrow. Emily's mother. For a single heartbeat, no one moved. Then her mother's gaze dropped to Noah. Her face crumbled, eyes filling with tears. "I wasn't strong," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I was scared of what people would think. I thought I'd lose the version of you I wanted, and instead, I lost you entirely." Emily's lips parted, but no words came. Her jaw trembled. Then her father appeared behind her mother, older than she remembered, hands knotted nervously. His eyes locked onto Noah like he was seeing something holy. Noah reached out his tiny hand, innocent, curious, unknowing of history. That small gesture shattered the walls that had stood for years. Her mother stepped forward, arms trembling. May I hold him?" Emily hesitated, breath caught in her throat. Then, slowly, she placed Noah in her mother's arms. The older woman clutched him like something fragile, whispering words Emily couldn't hear, sobs breaking through as Noah blinked up at her with wide-eyed wonder. John stood back, chest tight, knowing this wasn't his moment, but feeling its weight all the same. When Emily finally moved forward and wrapped her arms around her mother, the porch itself seemed to exhale. The past hadn't disappeared, but it had softened, like snow melting under the first touch of spring. Forgiveness wasn't a lightning strike, it was a sunrise. That afternoon, 3 generations sat at the same kitchen table where Emily once ate cereal before school. Her mother poured tea. Her father bounced Noah gently on his knee, laughter, real laughter, echoing through walls that had known only silence. From across the table, Emily caught John's eyes. She mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." He shook his head with a soft smile. "No," he whispered under his breath. "Thank you for going home." 1 year later, the world had shifted, not in headlines or noise, but in the ways that truly mattered. The chaos was gone. In its place was something quieter, stronger, a life. On a bright spring afternoon, they returned to the park, the very same park where it all began. Golden sunlight streamed through the trees, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of blooming grass. There were no towering arches, no photographers elbowing for perfect shots. Just a circle of friends, a white linen cloth stretched beneath an old oak tree, and a humble wooden arch wrapped in ivy and ribbon. And at the center of it all stood a little boy in a crisp navy vest and a matching bow tie. Noah, nearly 2 years old now, clutched a tiny velvet box in both hands as he waddled across the grass, his steps unsteady but determined. Every guest held their breath, watching him make his way to the man waiting just a few feet ahead. John didn't wear a polished designer suit, only a soft gray blazer Emily had once teased him about, saying it made him look almost human. His hair was longer now, silver threads catching the sunlight. But his eyes told the real story. They no longer carried the fog of grief. They shimmered with something infinitely rarer than wealth: hope. When Noah finally reached him, John bent down, steady hands lifting the little box from his son's grip. Noah giggled proudly before toddling back to the edge of the clearing, where Emily stood barefoot on the grass, her simple white dress dancing with the breeze. She had never looked more radiant, not because of the fabric, not because of the golden sun behind her, but because of the unmistakable light in her eyes, a light only earned by walking through shadows and surviving them. John stepped forward, velvet box in hand, and sank to one knee. The breeze stilled as if even the earth paused to listen. His voice trembled, low but steady. "You never asked me for anything," he began. "Not pity, not charity, not promises. On the hardest night of your life, you showed up with nothing, and somehow gave me everything. You reminded me what it feels like to be alive, to be needed." He opened the box. Inside was a simple ring. Not extravagant, not flashy, just elegant, chosen with care, not for its value, but for how it would look when she wore it, holding their son's tiny hand. "You didn't take my leftovers, Emily," John whispered, tears burning at the edges of his vision. "You gave me family. You gave me love. You gave me a future. Will you marry me?" Emily gasped, one hand covering her mouth. Her eyes filled instantly, tears sliding before she could even nod. "Yes," she whispered, then laughed through the flood of emotion. "Yes." She dropped to her knees in front of him, and they folded into each other's arms, two puzzle pieces finally locking into place after years of being lost. The minister began, simple and soft, while Noah plucked flower petals from the grass, occasionally glancing up with wide-eyed wonder, as if trying to understand why everyone looked so moved. But then, as John vowed not only to love Emily, but to protect the son who had brought them together, Noah toddled forward again. He wrapped his arms around John's leg and looked up with a grin. "Daddy," he chirped. The park fell silent. A single word, bright and small, shattered the air. John bent down, lifting Noah with trembling arms, his voice breaking as he whispered, "I love you, son." He pulled Emily close with his free arm, holding them both beneath the sun, and for the first time in years, everything broken inside him felt whole again. John hadn't saved a young mother. She had saved him from grief, from isolation, from a life so polished and hollow it nearly swallowed him whole. And Emily hadn't just survived. She had found a home, not built from stone or money, but from love. And Noah, once just a hungry baby in a candlelit restaurant, now walked with a father who hadn't chosen him by blood, but by heart. They were far from perfect. They didn't need to be. They were together, and that, finally, was enough. From a whispered question in a luxury restaurant to this moment beneath an old oak tree, their story had unfolded into something bigger than chance. A story of love, redemption, and second chances. Proof that sometimes the most extraordinary families are born from the quietest acts of kindness. If this story touched you, made you cry, or reminded you that compassion can rewrite lives, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to HOA-GLORIOUS Stories, where every story is crafted to heal hearts and remind us all that love is the most powerful miracle of all. We'll see you in the next story.